Hello, and welcome to Tales of Dread. Tonight, we have stories about werewolves. When they met the Dogman, these people had their own terrifying stories to tell. So have fun, but don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I was hiking in the woods of Oregon one day when I saw a strange humanoid figure far away in the trees. I was on the edge of a cliff, looking down at a creek with a small waterfall, and I thought I saw a deer. I brought my nice camera and even tried to take a picture of it. The way it moved, though, was strange, but I couldn't quite get a good picture of it. It seemed to notice that I was there. It looked like a person, but it wasn't a deer like I thought. About 6, 7 feet tall, with long dark brown hair. It also looked like it had no shoes on. From what I could tell, it also looked honest. I could see right away that the tips of its ears stuck straight up. It was moving around among the trees. I tried to get a good picture of it, but it was too far away. I even tried to get closer with my camera, but it kept going in and out of the trees and staying far away from me. So I walked a little further down the trail, and then I heard this strange sound coming from the trail ahead of me. I kept going because I was curious and wanted to try to get a picture of this strange creature. I heard a horrible scream that was unlike anything else I had ever heard. I was completely dumbfounded and shocked. I didn't know what was happening. I started walking back up the trail to where I had seen this thing before. Along the way, I came across a big tree that had been completely uprooted and was lying on its side. Then, as I look at this tree that has been uprooted, I feel like I'm being washed away from the trees. I turned around and looked at the trees behind me right away because I was scared and wanted to see what it was, but I didn't see anything. I went back the way I came and walked a little farther up the trail. I see the thing once more. I stopped for a moment to watch, but this time it was more hidden in the trees behind me. The same place where I first saw it, though. At this point, I knew that I had been watching me and following me. I just had this screaming feeling in the pit of my stomach that it was time for me to leave because I had been there too long. Then I turned around and started walking back down the trail toward where I had started. That's when the thing started to come out of the trees. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was so tall and looked even worse than I'd thought. That's when I really tried to find out what it was all about. It had a long face, which I thought I'd seen before from a distance, so I thought it was a deer. Originally, it had a very small nose and a serious look on its face. It didn't seem happy. This animal was also standing up straight, like a black bear, but it was completely out of place in the wild. This was no bear at all. I ran as fast as I could down the trail. After about a minute, I couldn't see it anymore. I think it went back into the woods after jumping, but I'm not sure I got out of the woods and back to my truck, even though I didn't look back the whole way. While I was running, I kept looking over my shoulder to make sure that thing wasn't following me. I just knew it wasn't right. Those kinds of animals don't belong here, and they shouldn't. Listen, I've backpacked and hiked a lot all around Oregon. I've never seen something like that before. I've heard that there are creatures like werewolves in places like Michigan, but I didn't know that there were similar creatures around here. Even now, I'm still scared of it. I know they were coming for me. I'm not going crazy, and I'm sure other people have seen the same thing. It must be one of those Dogman things I've heard of. You can find them all over the Midwest. I just don't want anyone else, especially someone who isn't ready for something like that, to see it. I live in eastern Pennsylvania, which is by far one of the creepiest places in the world. I've had my fair share of hauntings and paranormal experiences, so it's safe to say I've seen a few things. Some of those things have happened to me and my friends, but I know when someone is trying to trick you. This story isn't a joke, and nobody was trying to trick me. This is one I will always remember. I was 19 years old, and I was a delivery driver for a pizzeria where I worked. At the time, I had been working at this place for about 3 years. One day, the owner of the business called me and told me to go to the pizzeria. I didn't mind because I had to pick up my paycheck anyway, so I got in my little beat-up Honda Accord, turned on the radio, and drove down to the pizzeria. After I picked up my paycheck, I went to the bank to get money for the night. So I go to the bank. I was about to get some cash out of the bank when I felt someone behind me. I looked to my right and I guessed diagonally to my 40, which was my corner. I see this big shape, which at first I thought was a person walking toward me in the dim light of night. I'm already feeling very uneasy about the whole thing because it's night time and I'm getting money from an admin. With no weapon, they were completely defenseless. But as this person gets closer, I realize that there is something very wrong with this person. In reality, it's not even a person. I hate to say this because it sounds so crazy and corny, but it looked exactly like the werewolf creature, an American Werewolf in London. The movie, and all of that, had been shown to me 1,000,000 times, so it was the best thing I could think of to compare it to. It had the same eyes and face shape as a wolf, but it looked angry. Its body, however, was different. Its body was long and skinny, but its arms were very long and hung straight down at its sides. It also walked in a very smooth way. It was almost like it was floating toward me. I've never been so scared in my whole life as I was at that moment. I felt so helpless and vulnerable, especially since I was in a very open area. I had no way to move. I couldn't cry out or do anything else. I felt like I couldn't move. I was frozen as I stood there and watched this thing get closer and closer. I've never been afraid of dying before, but I was terrified of dying at that moment. As I watched this thing walk toward me, all I could think was that this is how I'm going to die. I've always wondered what it would be like to die, and I always thought it would be so peaceful, but I knew I was wrong. It was almost touching me. As it got closer to me, I could smell how bad it smelled. Then all of a sudden it stopped and looked me up and down in a strange way, as if it had also smelled something bad. Then, before stepping out into the full light of the parking lot, she started nervously looking around. It quickly turned its head to the left and made this horrible, loud screeching sound that I can't even begin to describe. Then I hear an answer off in the distance. It's the same sound. This just happened. As soon as the one in the distance answered this thing, there were more of them. It looked at me once more, kind of took a quick look at me, and then seemed to disappear into the shadows. Nothing like this has ever happened to me before. I was really scared. I was confused about what to do. I ran back to my car from the parking lot, and I didn't stop running until I was a few miles away. I have no idea what these things are or why they were made. I pulled over because if I hadn't, my nervousness and adrenaline would have made me crash for sure. I called my boss to tell her I was almost robbed. What I saw, I didn't tell her. Just tell me what these are and why there are more than one of them. I still have the same dreams about whatever it was I saw that day. I always wonder if I'll wake up and see that thing I saw that night standing outside my window looking in, ready to break in and tear me apart easily. The scariest thing I've ever done or seen. I work as a part-time security guard for a small IT firm that mostly works at night. Most of the time, my shifts are pretty boring because it's just me, and all I have to do is walk around the perimeter and keep an eye out for anything suspicious. I've had this job for a year now, and have only ever had one negative experience on the job. One that was even scarier than this one, which I'm about to tell you about, happened that spring. Yes, I still work at this job, and nothing like what I'm about to tell you has happened since that one night. I was in the main security room, mindlessly scrolling through Facebook while watching the feed. It was somewhere around 1 a.m. Then I saw movement from camera 4, which is outside and looks out over the north end of the parking lot. It looked like a big black shape that moved in and out of the frame of the camera. I couldn't tell what it was, but at first I thought someone was going to look around the building. So I head outside to do my duty and shine my flashlight around. I didn't see anything. But I noticed right away that the night was very quiet. There were no crickets, no wind, nothing. I've never heard or not heard anything like it. So I walked back into the building, went back to the control room and started looking at the feed. At first, nothing happened. But then, maybe 3 minutes later, I saw the same thing on a different camera feed from the east side of the building. That's when I first saw this thing. It was nothing like an animal. This thing was weird, and it looked just like a werewolf from a movie. I'm not making this up. It was at least 7 feet tall and had hair all over it. I couldn't make out any real features on the face. I can tell from the scene that the hands are long and look like claws. I was scared when I saw this. It was moving in a way that made no sense to anyone who could move in a costume. When I saw this thing on the feed at that time, I knew it had to be real. I was horrified as I sat there and watched this. It looked like it was looking for something, and then it quickly walked out of the picture. What I just saw blew my mind. I went outside to see if there was anything I could see, but there wasn't. so I just looked up at the building and waited for my shift to be over. The rest of the night, until about 3:30 a.m., I didn't see anything else like it. I went outside to smoke a cigarette, but the night was still very quiet and seemed tense. How it feels. During my smoke break, however, nothing happened. But when my shift was over, I left and went home. When I woke up the next morning, I went back to work, still in a constant state of shock. No one could really understand what I saw. I mean, what am I supposed to tell my boss? He or she would think I was on drugs. And if you think I could get proof that this thing exists, all the footage from the 8 camera feeds is sent directly to an encrypted server that the company keeps in a different building where I have no access. I'm not sure if it even gets looked at. I think it just sits on an external hard drive in case it needs to be looked at for some reason. I guess if you don't know, this is a pretty standard way to run a business. Anyway, I work from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. and I thought I should mention that. The cameras are all on a 12-hour loop, so this creature would have to come back for me to even have a chance of catching it on camera. I still work there, as I said, and I've made it a point to watch the feed a little more closely every night, though I'll do this again. What I saw that night was unlike anything else I've ever seen. A few times I've seen people on the camera, but nothing suspicious. Nothing like what I saw that night, I should say. Every day I do think about what I saw, and sometimes I'm not going to lie. I think about it while I'm in the control room. I'm scared that it could happen again. So I'm writing this because I don't know who to talk to about it and what to do if I see it again in the future. Anyway, thank you for listening. I was driving home from a late night shift. It was a clear night and the moon was bright. There wasn't much traffic on the road and I was looking forward to getting some much needed sleep. The peace didn't last long though, and I was startled to see a person running in front of my car. I hit the brakes hard, which made my car swerve. This figure disappeared into the darkness, and I thought it was just a deer because I couldn't really see what it was. I kept driving home, but then I started to feel nervous, to the point where I could feel my heartbeat getting faster and faster. I tried to get rid of the feeling, but I couldn't. When I looked in my rearview mirror, I felt like I was being followed, but there was nothing there like I thought there would be. I just kept looking up, hoping to see something. I kept looking up again and again, and when I looked one last time, I saw a dark figure standing on the side of the road behind my car. Then I felt my heart skip a beat, so I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop, and I just wanted to jump out, thinking someone or something was hurt and needed help. Look, I know it doesn't make sense. As I explain it, I don't really understand it myself. I just felt like I needed to do these things. Everything about the situation was scary. But what should I have done? Of course, when I got out, no one was there. Now I start to worry and wonder if I'm really going crazy. So I get back in the car and speed off. A few minutes pass, and I drive by the place where I thought I saw the figure. I had to make a big loop, and this was where the loop went back to the other road. Tough to figure out and explain. I know, but I saw something with what looked like red glowing eyes and the shape of a large upright Doberman pinscher. I slammed on the brakes and watched as this thing took 2 steps and quickly crossed the road. After that, I was done. I drove as fast as I could to get away from it, and it was a relief to see the red eyes of the creature go away as I drove away. I'm telling you right now that I've never seen anything like that in my whole life. That night has left me scared. And to be honest, I'm still scared to drive on that same road at night, even though it happened years ago. Original email sent August 2020. I like to think of myself as a cryptid researcher, but before this account I didn't know anything about Bigfoot, the dog, the hate man, the Mothman, or any other creature like that. In fact, these things have always been a source of inspiration for me. However, I never thought in a million years that I would actually meet one of them, let alone that it would try to attack me or try to find out information about me. I'm 22 years old, and since high school, I've been very interested in cryptozoology and field research. I've done things like go out into the woods at night and knock on trees, call for Bigfoot, and just about anything else you can think of. Anyway, I spent the night with a close friend who lived nearby. This happened on May 25. I also live in a very rural part of Pennsylvania, and I had been out looking for some of my favorite creatures, like Dogman and Bigfoot. I also live in the woods right next to a creek, and I was going to make some videos of myself in the woods at night so I could put them on my YouTube channel. Around 11:30, a close friend and I went out. I set up my camera and started walking up and down the creek. I did this for 25-30 minutes, but the only animals I saw were a few small deer and possums. After that, we walked through a forest on a path that goes behind my house. I'm not going to lie. I had the feeling that someone was watching us the whole time. Then both of us heard a sound coming from the trees. From the corner of my eye, I could see that my friend also stopped moving. I saw something that looked like a dog but was much too tall to be a dog. When it came running out of the woods at us, we realized it wasn't a dog. So we turned and ran. I heard something running behind us, and before we knew it, it was on us. I could hear it breathing, chasing and crashing through the woods, and now my friend was screaming. I was able to get my cell phone out, but it didn't work. I hear this thing turn around, jump over a big downed tree, and then go away. What it was, I don't know, but I know it wasn't a dog. When I got back to my house, my friend was pretty scared. He told me what he saw too, and said it looked like a brown dog-like creature with a scary face. But the face looked like it was part dog and part person. I also saw it. We both saw the same thing, so we know it's true. We went back to the scene later in the morning, probably between 3 and 4, and that's when we found weird hair, like strands. The next day, my friend and I went back to the same site in the afternoon, and I also did some research on it. If you have any ideas or suggestions about what this could have been or how it could have been, you can send me an email. I'm sure, though, that this person was a Dogman. Update April 2021. So, I've been back to the creek a few times and have seen a lot of weird things. Most people will think I'm crazy when I tell them about the first time I met a Dogman. But based on what I've seen since my first encounter, I'm sure I'm not the only one who has seen this thing. I've seen large dog-like creatures and humanoid creatures that all walk on 2 legs. Some of them look like wolves, while others look more like lions or hyenas. It was crouched and looking up at me. I even have videos of these things, which I will try to upload as soon as possible. Many people have told me that it's just a bear, but I'm not so sure. I've seen a few bears in my life, so I know what they look like. I'm not sure how I feel about this. I've been out of the woods a few times, and have even seen these things up close. I've seen a few of these people who look like dogs. I'm here to tell you that they are very tall and have faces that kind of look like humans. Maybe I'm seeing a group of people who are all the same. I don't know if they also live in groups called tribes. I've seen a lot of these things in the last year. Is there a reason? Is it possible that I marked it? I'm not sure, but these things look a lot like what I saw when I first saw them in May 2018. Several other people in this area have seen the same things, and I'm just trying to keep track of them all. I'll do a little more research and then go out again soon. If you have any suggestions about what I should do or where I should look, please let me know. Please tell me a little bit about yourself. This happened when I was 13 and I'm now 18. At night, I was playing on the backside of our property, where there is a large meadow and then a very thick wood line with fir, pine and oak trees. I was playing in the field or meadow behind my house when I saw this strange animal far away. It was getting dark, so the light wasn't great, but it wasn't totally dark yet either. I saw something that looked like a bear or a hyena come out of the tall wheat grass. It stood up straight and had very dark brown fur. This thing can't be missed when you see it. I mean, it was as clear as a bell, and then I saw something even scarier. I was too scared to move, so I just stood there and watched it for a few seconds before turning around and walking away. I have no idea what it was. It couldn't have been a normal hyena. I mean, I've never heard of a hyena that can walk on its hind legs. I also live in Ohio, and the last time I looked, hyenas don't live in the United States and don't even try to stand up straight. Like what I saw that night when it turned away from me and started to walk away. It then got down on all fours and seemed to just disappear. It also had a very large arch in its back, and as it moved on all fours, it looked very uncomfortable and awkward. I have never in my whole life seen a hyena that looked like that. It was just a crazy experience that I'll never forget, but I just found your channel and wanted to get in touch with you because I think you're the coolest person I've ever met. You might know why I saw what I did that night. I appreciate you taking the time to read this, and I hope to hear from you soon. By the way, I want to thank you for the work you do. I know how hard it is to deal with people who don't believe what you say and have closed minds. When I was 16, a friend and I both saw what we think was a Bigfoot. 2 in Arkansas, 1 in Pine Bluff and 1 in the Ouachita National Forest. The one in Pine Bluff happened in 2019, but I'll talk about those in another email. There is a lot to type. Thank you again. Back in 2015, I saw something I can't quite explain while camping in the 4th of Maine in July. It was like something out of a horror movie, and I knew right then that I would have to tell this story, that I would have to share this unbelievable experience with the world. And I haven't stopped since, and now I feel like I've finally reached a point where I can share it all the way. When it all started, my brother Noah, his wife Rachel, and my good friend Kyle and I were camping in the Forks, which is right on the border between Maine and New Hampshire. It's a beautiful mountainous area, and many people go there to hunt and camp. The campsite was beautiful. It was privately owned and set in a small clearing surrounded by pine trees. The sound of crickets and the slow flow of the river made it a great place to camp. Around 2:30 a.m, I woke up and decided to go for a walk. I was also totally sober at this point, and the few beers I had earlier in the night didn't affect me at all. Everything was dark except for the faint light from the moon. The air was cool. I couldn't help but think about how peaceful everything was as I walked away from the campsite and into the woods. It was so quiet, and I couldn't see a single light from any of the other campsites in the area. I went to the river and just stood there, taking it all in. I thought to myself that I was one lucky guy to have the life I do and to be able to experience this. Then, as I was enjoying the peace of nature around me, I heard something move in the brush across the river. Even in the dim moonlight, I saw whatever it was step out onto the small shoreline, which was lucky for me because I was there. This bad thing didn't seem to notice me and seemed to be going somewhere or doing something, but I saw it. The best way I can describe it is that it looked bad. It looked a bit like a wolf, but it was much uglier and meaner. I have never been so scared before. It was also very tall and long, but because it was so skinny, it was hard to tell how big it was. It also had a strange body that looked like it was broken up into pieces, and it moved funny, like it wasn't used to walking on all fours. Then it did something that made my stomach drop. It stood up on 2 legs perfectly well, just like a person would. It turned around and looked at me, then looked away, and started trotting around like it was happy. I just stood there and looked at it for a minute. When it moved away, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and I knew right then that I wasn't alone. I was sure that whatever these things were, they were real and not just people dressed up. I mean, why would someone be out at 2:30 a.m. dressed like that? I should also say that when I say it looked at me, I mean that it looked in my general direction, but I don't think it saw me. God bless. When it was gone, I ran back to camp, woke up my brother-in-law and his wife, and told them what I had seen. I was sure they would think I was crazy. They didn't, though. They believed me right away and said they had seen something similar years ago. That's pretty much the end of my story. Even though it's been a while, I'm still trying to figure out what I saw that night. I know that my brother and friends believe me, and they even want me to write a book the next day about what happened. Noah talked in detail about how he had seen a creature that was similar to what I had seen, but it looked more like a werewolf to him. He got home late one night and was pulling into his driveway when all of a sudden he saw this thing at the end of his driveway. Even though it was facing away from him, he could see it well because his headlights lit it up. He knew or had the feeling that it was waiting for him. He saw it from about 20-30 feet away. From the back, it looked like a big brown wolf, but it was standing on 2 legs like a person. He said it turned around, and when he got out of his car and saw its yellow eyes, he was scared. He said he got back in his car and drove away as quickly as he could, but what was it? Where does it belong? Why does it look like a wolf? I still don't know the answers to all of these questions, and I hope to find out. I want to figure this out one day. I want to talk more about my story. I'm not crazy. I know they are out there. I can't say what these things are, but I know what they are not. They are not like most wolves. They are neither a bear nor a person. It has nothing to do with a mix-up or anything else. I'm not sure exactly what I saw, but I hope I won't see it again. But I know it was real, and I want to know what I saw that night. March 2017. We live in a very rural area where there is a lot of wildlife. I'm talking about everything from owls to coyotes. There is even a deer family living in our front yard. It really is a lovely place. The signs of all the local owls are one of the most beautiful things we see. Many live in our area. Our ecosystem is in great shape. But I'll never forget on March 31, 2017 at night, I saw my neighbour's security light turn on, which lit up my whole bedroom. I heard a sound, looked up, and saw what I can only call a dogman. From where I stood, I could see it. Its ears were long and pointed, and its mouth was very big. It looked like it was smiling or making a joke at me. In fact, when I was looking out the window, it was looking right at me. As soon as it saw me, it said, "Holy crap," out loud, and then it seemed to go away into the night. A retired police officer lives next door to me. He hasn't seen one himself, but other officers have told him about them. I didn't tell him about the sighting, but he knows I'm interested in things like Bigfoot, so he asked me what I thought about this dogman thing. Since I'm 46 years old and have only seen one in my life, I think it's a rare sighting. I think it lives in this area and can move through the trees without making any noise. It probably sneaks around the neighbourhood without being seen or heard, or at least not very often. Thinking about it gives me the creeps. Also, thanks for everything you do, and I thought it was important to tell you my story. I don't know what it was, but it was about the size of a big wolf, and it was across the street from my car. I was driving late at night in Kentucky and was about to turn onto the next stretch of unincorporated road when I saw this unidentified animal running across the street from the field over the road. It was on all fours. I put on my brakes and turned to avoid hitting it. After that, I never saw the thing again, and I don't want to think about what it might have been. It went for at least a half mile. At first, we thought it might be a plane, but there were no blinking lights, and it wasn't moving. It was as creepy as it gets. This isn't my first time then. I've seen some strange things before, but when I saw that big wolf thing, something about it didn't feel right. It didn't look right in any way, and it didn't look natural. And believe it or not, I've seen wolves in the woods before, which is rare, but I have. The one I saw didn't look like a wolf, though. I really have no idea what it was. Something like a wild dog or dire wolf. It looked like a wolf, but I don't know why it wasn't a wolf. But I know I'm not crazy, and what I saw is true. A long time ago, this happened in the fall in Alberta. It was early in the morning, and I was looking for a good place to set up a tree stand. I was sitting in my new knot-point arrow rest combo with my bow in my hands. The morning was very cold and crisp, but the sun felt very warm on my face. So I walked to a small patch of forest with a lot of young trees. As I went around a small bush, I noticed a very strange smell that I had never smelled in the woods before. I felt like I had run into a brick wall, and it made me think of two other things. They weren't immediately noticeable, but there was a strange smell of wet dog and blood in the background. I stopped, but because of the sun, it took me a second to see the animal. It was facing me as it stood in a patch of grass. I let the bow down and took a step or two to the side so I could see it fully what I saw. I honestly can't accurately depict it because it was so incredibly strange. Even if I told you, you wouldn't believe me, but that's not why I'm writing this. So I'll try hard. It looked like a monkey crossed with a hyena, and it did strange things when it saw me. It turned its head to look at me from the side, and I noticed that its head was very long and thin, like a horse's, but not as big. It was almost like looking at a hyena that had been stretched out, though. I saw ears that almost ended in a point at the top. Like I said, it had a long nose and a flat bottom. It had a longer upper jaw. The whole thing looked very strange, and so did the eyes. They looked brown, but they are very sunken in, so I could only see the black half of the eyes. I got closer to get a better look, and as I did, this animal turned its body to face me. Now, aside from everything else, the first thing I noticed was the big claws on the sides of its hands. I called it hands because of the way it looked. It had a long hanging tail. It was thick, like the arm of a man. So I kept walking toward it, and it started walking backwards. Its front legs were longer than its back legs, but it walked in a very strange way and seemed scared that I was coming towards it. I mean, a sane person probably wouldn't do what I did, but I did it quietly and with a lot of care. When it was about 20 yards away from me, it turned around and ran. It was moving so fast that I couldn't keep up. I tried to run after it, but it kept darting through the trees in different directions. A few times, it looked back at me for a few seconds before disappearing into the thicket. I wanted to try to take a picture of it, or get a better look at what I was seeing. I didn't worry about it. Part of me thought it might be a species of animal that hadn't been found yet. What I saw after I lost sight of it is very interesting to me. The day kept going. When I finally got home, I decided to try to figure out what I had seen that day by doing some research. Even though I couldn't find anything that even remotely looked like what I saw, I knew it was a different species because of how it moved, walked, and looked. Listen, I've never heard of this before. Has anyone else come across something similar? I've been hunting and scouting in this area for years, and I've never seen anything like it. I now live in northern Alabama, and I like Sasquatch a lot. In fact, I've seen 2 of these things. Well, more than 2, but only twice. The first time I saw one was in the fall of 2003. I was walking up my driveway to my house when I saw a really tall, dark figure standing by our clothesline. It had its eyes on me. I've always been interested in Bigfoot, and I can recognize a bear. It didn't have a bear's face. It was all black and had a flat nose and a mouth that looked like it had no lips. So scared was I that I ran back to my house. It didn't work. It just walked away without a fuss. I entered my house through the side door and stood there for a while. I watched it walk all the way up a hill across the street from my house and disappear into the woods. I gave my neighbors a call. When I told them I'd seen a Sasquatch, they didn't believe me and thought I was crazy. I told them I saw it by our clothesline, and it's still there. So we all piled into my car to see if it had returned. When we get there, still, it was gone. We looked around the woods, and I told them to look at the trees to see if they could see anything. No, they didn't do that, but I did. About 5 of these things were walking away from me. They looked like they were walking down the street holding hands like kids do. It was very strange. In the spring of 2004, I saw these things for the second time. This time, they were in a field next to the road. About 8 of them were standing around and looked like they were digging in the dirt. I noticed one thing about them, how they walked. Their front legs were much longer than the legs of the other 2 I saw. They stood about 8 feet tall too. I just saw them as I was driving down the road. I didn't stop. I just kept on going. I did want to take a picture or video of them, but I didn't want to leave my car. To be honest, it really scared me. Anyway, I'm telling you all this to show that the animal that looked like a cross between a horse and a monkey and a hyena did not scare me. It's unlike anything I've ever seen or heard. But the 2 different Sasquatch signs I saw were much scarier and more frightening. I truly felt genuine fear. I'm going into the woods more often now, and based on your channel, I'm trying to hear or see something that will help me figure out what I saw that day. Everything points to a Dogman. I'm trying, but even with a lot of physical therapy, all I can see out here are wood boogers that look like what I saw one day in Alberta.